A big point of speculation among the Suikoden fandom is the identity of Hugo's father. Over the years, many theories about the identity of this man have been floating around. So why don't we dig into the theories and see if we can break them down and figure out which are plausible. First, let's look over the information that everybody has been basing their theories off of. The theory page on Suikoden lists these 5 points, and these same points are cited in every single thread or forum post where people discuss the identity of Hugo's dad. He was a kind man, according to Lucia. Lucia herself says this to Hugo during Chapter 2 in the Japanese version, although in the North American release this was translated to "You're a fine man." He has black hair, according to Fumi Ishikawa, the character designer of the Suikoden series since Suikoden 2. The black part of Hugo's hair comes from his dad. To be more specific, Fumi Ishikawa was the character designer for Suikoden 2 and 3, Suikoden 1 and 2, as well as Suikoden card stories. She also illustrated book covers, posters, and promotional art for the series during that time, certainly making her a very important and key member of the Suikoden development team. He is no longer a member, nor is he a part of the Karaya clan, because Lucia and Hugo live by themselves. Either Hugo's dad is not a Karaya clan member, or he is a dead Karayan. So this doesn't exactly reveal much of anything. This point is essentially saying he could be anybody. We have already been introduced to his dad, although unconfirmed, due to Konami's insistence to keep Hugo's father's identity a secret. Many assume that we have already met Hugo's dad. So this is just pure assumption by the fandom that we've met his dad, as the point itself states the information is unconfirmed by Konami. Hugo was born right after the Dunnan Unification War, which means Lucia got pregnant or was pregnant during the war. The Dunnan Unification War lasted 6 months, and seeing that the normal human gestation period is 9 months, although this may be different in the Suikoden world, she may have been pregnant before the said war. This means that she may have interacted with any black-haired male in Suikoden 2. Okay, so from kids' investigations in Suikoden 3, it's confirmed that Hugo was born after the war. Hugo investigation number 3. When Lucia came back from the Dunnan Unification War, Hugo was born. And Lucia investigation number 2. During the Dunnan Unification War, she fought for Highland. After, she came back to Grassland and raised Hugo. Fans have taken this to meaning that Hugo was born immediately following the war. We don't know for certain if that's the case, but Hugo certainly would have been born in the months following the war. So with all of that out of the way, let's run through who the fandom believe is the father. There are quite a few characters people speculate about, so this could be a long video. First, I'll start with the guesses posted on Suikoden, which cherry-picked the most popular choices at the time, and then I'll move on to some of the other characters people speculated about over the years. Let's start with Beecham. Back in the early days of Suikoden 3, Beecham was probably the most speculated character for the identity of Hugo's dad. He accompanied Lucia and fought alongside her as her right-hand man when they allied with the Highland Kingdom in the Dunnan Unification War. One of the main reasons for the speculation about Beecham is that during the attempted liberation of Muse in Suikoden 2, when Lucia's unit is defeated, she says the line, "I'm sorry, Beecham." Now that could mean a number of things. It could mean sorry for putting your lives in danger. Maybe Beecham advised against entering the war and Lucia's sorry could mean, "Sorry I didn't listen to you." It's not a whole lot to go on, it's a vague line that could mean a number of things. Another reason for some people's speculation is that they think the scar on his face, which he received in the final battle while charging enemy lines to ensure Lucia could safely retreat, was done so out of love. However, it's more likely that that was just an act of bravery to save the life of his clan chief and his friend. The theory states that the fact that Beecham already has a wife and his own children seems to make this match improbable. Improbable, yes, but not impossible. For starters, we don't know exactly how long Beecham has been married, or how old his children are. All we know is that he's married and has children, though the one daughter of his that we do see during Suikoden 3 is clearly younger than Hugo is. He could have gotten married and had kids after returning from the war, but Beecham was 27 during Suikoden 2, so it's possible that he has been married since before Suikoden 2 and that he may have children older than Hugo. But remember Lucia's words. He was a kind man, past tense. The father is no longer around, and Beecham very much is around. If he was the father, why hide it? Besides, he has never given off the feeling of anything other than being her right-hand man, her loyal aide, and her close friend. Nothing more. It's not impossible, but it certainly is improbable. Next up is Jimba. Quite a few people back in the day speculated that Jimba could be Hugo's dad. The author of the article takes a very dismissive tone to this suggestion due to Jimba's hair colour, yet had no issues with Beecham's hair colour despite the two having similar blonde hair. Jimba, or Wyatt Lightfellow, admits that he changed his appearance when he sought refuge in the Karayan village, though flashbacks show his physical appearance to be pretty much identical to what it is now, and he even had blonde hair back then. But is the blonde hair actually an issue? Fumi Ishikawa says that the father had black hair. But did he have black hair? I'll circle back to Jimba later in the video. Next up is Han Cunningham. Although he is an old codger, he actually fits every single one of the requirements mentioned above. He is kind, we know him, he was present in Highland when Lucia was there, and of course he has black hair. It's highly unlikely to be Han Cunningham considering the 40+ year age gap between him and Lucia. Sure, it's not impossible as some women do like older men, but it's very unlikely. Han Cunningham's only involvement in the war was the defence of Lorenwi. Lucia spent most of the war in the Greenhill and Meuse territories. Her only recorded presence in Lorenwi was during the defence of the city in the final battle of the war. Hardly enough time for them to get to know one another, but there's no evidence either way to say yes or no. Next we have Leon Silverberg. We've never seen anything kind about Leon. The main points fans tried to raise here are stretches at best. The first being that they were both foreigners to Highland, so maybe they bonded. Sure, it's possible that might have been something to help bond over, but everything we've seen of Leon up until this point show him as quite a loner. One of the reasons he chose living in Calicut was for the silence. The second being that in Suikoden 3, Lucia says she can vouch for Caesar. But vouching for Caesar could simply mean nothing more than, I fought alongside his granddad, and I can vouch for his family's talent as strategists. There doesn't seem to be anything to this one except wishful thinking among some fans. So this next one is just straight up ridiculous. Some fans, and by some I mean a very small minority of fans, speculated that the identity of Hugo's dad was Ryu. Like I said, this is ridiculous. Every encounter they had, Lucia was trying to kill him. The fact that some fans even believe this is insane. Next, we have George Prime. So this theory speculates that because both George and Lucia were both spotted in Meuse and Greenhill, that timeline-wise it's possible for them to have had contact. But that's not true. The timeline doesn't match up at all. Yes, both George and Lucia were in Meuse and Greenhill during the events of Suikoden 2, but not at the same time, or even close to the same time. George was in Meuse at the beginning of the game. He fled during the fall of Meuse while helping Dr. Huon escape. After this, George would then head west towards Greenhill, where we see him during Suikoden Volume 1 when he was attacking a Highland camp. This took place during Joey's siege of Greenhill, which would have been around the time the player met Fitcher and headed towards Two River City to form an alliance. George left Greenhill immediately after attacking the Highland camp, where he headed south, where Ryu would later meet him in the mountains between Drakemouth Village and Tigermouth Village. Lucia and the Karayans still hadn't even joined the war or entered the Dunnan region at this point. To fast forward through events from here, Ryu protects Two River from General Kiba. Ryu then infiltrates Greenhill and rescues Teresa. You then travel to the Matilda Knightdom in an attempt to form an alliance. Ryu and the allied army defeat General Kiba. Joey and Luca kill King Ageres. Ryu then travels to the Tauran Republic to meet President Lepant to form an alliance. Then they go on to defeat Luca Blight and Joey becomes King of Highland. Joey invites Ryu and Teresa to Meuse, leading them into a trap. and they escape. After this, they travel to Tinto to form an alliance and defend it from Necklord. The first time we see Lucia is when she sneaks into your bedroom and attempts to assassinate you right after returning from Tinto, and before your army moves to liberate Greenhill. As for Muse, Lucia wasn't in Muse until after the liberation of Greenhill. Now that's not to say they may never have met. George was in the grasslands between the solar years 446 and 449, but Lucia would have been 6 to 10 years old at the time. The timeline doesn't match up at all. This rules out George. So now we get into the theories from forums and Reddit and some of these border nonsense territory. The first one being Luca Blight. So straight up nonsense. I don't even know why people speculate it's Luca Blight. Lucia and the Coraians didn't join the war until long after Luca had died. There's no evidence to suggest that they ever even met. And don't forget Lucia's comment about Hugo's dad being a kind man. Is that a description anyone would apply to Luca Blight? I don't think so. The man was a monster through and through. I don't see any way in which this is possible. Victor. So this one is just as ridiculous as the Ryu theory. Some people speculate that since Victor is the one who reveals that Lucia broke out of her cell during the night, that she seduced him into opening the cell and letting her go. This would be completely out of character for Victor. Do you really think that Victor would let an assassin who just tried to murder his friend out of her cell because she offered to sleep with him? Not a chance. It would be completely out of character for Victor. Next up, this one makes absolutely no sense. Shin. It's highly unlikely. By the time Lucia and the Coraians entered the war, Shin was already a member of your army. Shin would leave the Dunnan Republic immediately following the war, and the peace talks between the Dunnan Republic and the Coraya clan happened sometime after the war. This wouldn't leave much or any room at all for Shin to meet Lucia. There's also the fact that Shin was in love with Teresa. He departed immediately following the end of the war to hone his skills as a swordsman as he felt unworthy of Teresa's love. It doesn't seem within his character to pursue another woman when we've seen just how devoted he is to Teresa. The only possible encounters he could have had with Lucia would have either been on the battlefield or potentially during the liberation of Greenhill if you agreed to bring him along with Teresa. Besides, do you really think he's going to hook up with the person trying to kill the woman he loves? It would go against everything we see of his personality and his character throughout the game. Next we have Gedo. So this one is also highly unlikely. 70 years prior to Suikoden 3, Gedo was involved in some sort of tragedy that happened in Coraian territory that caused him to lose his right eye and inherit the True Lightning Rune. Because of this, he strongly disliked being on Coraian land and considered their land to be cursed. The only reason he travelled to the Coraian village was to find out information about the Firebringer, and only after the chief of the Lizard clan was assassinated. And Jimba was quite surprised to see him there due to his bad memories of the place. Next up we have Jowy. Some people think he was sleeping with Lucia. Honestly, when you think about Jowy, is it actually that far outside of the realm of possibility? Yes, he did fall in love with Julia, but it's not beyond him to lie to and betray the people closest to him. Yes, he had his reasons for doing so, but he lied to and betrayed his best friends. Then he betrayed King Ageres. Then he betrayed King Luca. He lied to and misled his best friends and led them into an ambush, threatening to kill them unless they surrendered. He lied to and misled the Highland soldiers by faking the sacrifice of Julia to the Beast Realm. Jowy spent almost the entire game lying to, manipulating, and deceiving everyone around him to achieve his goals. So would it be a stretch to think he might lie to and manipulate Lucia, using her to help him achieve his goals? If you compare a picture of Hugo's face to Jowy's face, there are quite a few similarities. They have almost the exact same jawline and chin shape. The overall facial structure is very similar. did she do so with the father's appearance in mind? It certainly appears she used Joey's face as the foundation for making Hugo's face. So, could Joey be the father? Although the problem here is that Fumi Ishikawa stated that the father has black hair, and Joey's hair is more blondish brown. However, the Suikoden revival movement interviewed Yoshitaka Murayama in 2016, and one of the questions they asked him was about the identity of Hugo's dad. Murayama simply replied, "Some blonde guy." So now who do we believe? Do we believe the character artist who designed all of the characters? Or do we believe the man who created, wrote, produced and directed the series up until this point? During the same interview he was asked, often when talking about the story of Suikoden, it's said that you had a notebook in which you collected all your ideas about the history of the Suikoden world. Did this really exist, and did you have any plans for Suikoden games after Suikoden 3? To which he responded, "Although we did have a general outline, I personally believe that the setting exists to help tell the story, and we never focus purely on the setting first. So a document detailing the entire history of the Suikoden world does not exist. To elaborate, suppose I create 100% of the setting. Roughly 30% of this would be used explicitly in-game, and the other 70% would only be referred to in order to give depth to the backstory, meaning a lot of these details were never fully fleshed out. Fumi Ishikawa may very well have been headcanoning who she thought the father was while designing the characters, or she may have been designing the characters based on notes she received from Murayama. Or it's possible that, as the interview took place 14 years after the game released, Yoshitaka Murayama may have forgotten the details of who Hugo's dad was. Or perhaps it's not something he ever planned or thought about, as by his own admission, all they ever had was a general outline and most details were never fleshed out. So it's very probable that the identity of Hugo's dad is not something that was ever planned out, or even considered, as it was irrelevant to the story. There's also Wyatt Lightfellow from Zexen, but is he actually from Zexen? His place of origin is never revealed. What we do know about him is that he's 92 years old. He fought side by side with the Grasslanders in the First Firebringer War. After the war, he travelled to Zexen to try and live a normal life. There he would eventually meet Anna Lightfellow. The two fell in love, got married, had a child together, and lived happily for several years. Lightfellow may not even be his family name. He may have taken on Anna's surname when they got married. Why would he take on Anna's surname? Well, he was being hunted by the Howling Vice Guild, so it would make sense to try and hide his identity. But when the Howling Vice Guild tracked him down and attempted to assassinate him, he fled to the grasslands to keep his family out of danger, sealed his true water rune away and sought refuge with the Karaya clan, explaining his story to Lucia, who helped him change his name and identity to Jimba. So why did he choose to go to the Karayans? Well, he may originally be a Grasslander. Wyatt, or Jimba if you prefer, is over 90 years old. It's unlikely any of the Karayans alive during Suikoden 3 would have remembered him. And to circle back to Hugo's parentage, would Wyatt have left his wife and child behind to protect them, only to then father another child with another woman and risk putting them in danger? That's doubtful and goes against his character development. Lucia talks about Hugo's dad in the past tense, as if he is no longer around. He was a kind man, the key word being was. If Lucia wasn't pregnant when the Karayans entered the Dunnan Unification War, then could Hugo's dad be Joey? Hugo and Joey's faces in their character art share similar features and shapes. Maybe after drawing hundreds of characters there's bound to be some similarities. Or maybe the reason they share similarities is intentional. Or the identity of Hugo's father could simply be a Karayan warrior she grew close with during the war. But if Lucia was already pregnant when the Karayans entered the Dunnan Unification War, which appears to be the case, then it's highly likely that Hugo's dad was just some nameless Karayan warrior who accompanied Lucia during the war, and was unfortunately killed during the conflict. A disappointing answer and not an exciting answer, but it is the most likely answer. If you have any other ideas on who you think the identity of Hugo's dad is, or if you'd like to see more theory videos, please let me know in the comments below.